Hi, I'm Shalomia, and you are listening to Free People, a podcast by the Ark of Yahweh. Today, I want to begin with three questions. How far are you willing to go for Yahweh? How quickly are you willing to do it? And once you arrive at the place He instructs you to go, will you do what Yahweh says to do there? These questions are very much so alive for us right now. Yesterday, Yahweh asked these very questions of one member of the Ark, whose name is Sarah, and her response became a really radiant example for day 13 of the Omer, Yahsod within Gevurah. Her service gave us a living picture of commitment and bonding that is expressed through discipline. Yahsod has to do with connection and attachment. It's about bonding. And all of this is related to, of course, foundation, because a foundation is what holds a structure in place, and a foundation keeps things from shifting when pressure comes. It can bear weight. And a foundation allows what is being built to stand with strength and endurance. And so that is why Yahsod is connected to commitment and bonding. It speaks to what we're joined to, what we remain connected to, what we are stable enough to carry. And so when we look at Yahsod through the lens of Gevurah, we begin to see things like disciplined attachment. We begin to see how the soul is trained to stay bound to Yahweh's voice with firmness and order and follow through. If I were to find a word that could sum all of that up in everyday language, I would say that is obedience. That is why Sarah's service matters so much. In Tehillim 79:1, it says, "O Yahweh, the nations have come into your inheritance. They have defiled your set-apart temple." Many of you may not know this, but the Ark of Yahweh was recently ransacked and defiled and violated. Things were taken that belonged to the Ark of Yahweh. In fact, recently at Shabbat, I shared with you all how Yahweh instructed me to name one of the many battles we're currently waging, but one of them named Operation Ruth. Well, that battle has something to do with this defilement that I'm speaking about the at the Ark of Yahweh. And in due time, I'll share more about this, but it's not necessary for me to go into full detail because it's not the full focus of today's episode. I mention it because it connects to Sarah's service unto Yahweh yesterday. But in terms of dwelling places being attacked, this is not really surprising to me, although I was incensed about it and I remain incensed about it. It wasn't surprising because in Scripture, the dwelling places of Yahweh are often attacked and defiled and violated. There is a pattern, well-known pattern in Scripture of demonic forces rising against what belongs to Yahweh. And so what happened to the ark fits inside that larger pattern. When I was in Israel, Yahweh spoke to me and said that this attack on the ark is an attempt to stifle and silence his conduits and vessels, and that it must be answered. He also made clear that one step in the ark's response would soon be decided at a courthouse in Delaware, and that the ark was to go there and pray, to prepare the way for a righteous ruling concerning this impermissible search and seizure and violation of Yahweh's dwelling place. That instruction was very specific. Yahweh didn't tell me that I should go and do it alone. He said that the ark must do it. So earlier this week, we were trying to understand who Yahweh was appointing for this important assignment. And then Yahweh spoke to my sister and said that it was to be Sarah. Now, there were immediate practical obstacles. Sarah lives in another state on the East Coast, and she was also preparing to go out of town. Yet, when the ask was made, her response was immediate. Her answer was, Hanani, here I am. She dropped everything that she was doing, got in her car, traveled 2 states away, and moved with urgency on the very same day. Then, when she arrived, she carried out the instructions exactly as they had been given to her. She touched the doorpost of the building like one touches the mezuzah as a sign that Yahweh's presence was entering that place. She circled the building like Yehoshua at Jericho when the walls came tumbling down. She prayed as Yahuwah Kodesh moved in her soul. And, you know, when I'm saying this out loud and saying it quickly, it might sound like this is simple. But when you consider that she was alone, outside, visible to others, carrying out acts that could easily make a person feel exposed or self conscious, then the weight of her obedience becomes much more clear. What she did required humility and courage and discipline. It required a willingness to look foolish in the eyes of the world for the sake of honoring Yahweh's instruction. What makes this even more moving is that Sarah's service came after Yahweh revealed her name change. She recently has been given the Hebrew name Moriah, and that immediately draws, of course, our attention to Mount Moriah, which is seen in Torah over and over and over again. But specifically, this is also the place where Avraham and Yitzhak walked out one of the most difficult acts of obedience in all of Torah. And so this connection is powerful because this act of obedience, also known as the Akida or the binding of Yitzhak, it is a story about obedience at its highest cost. It is an account about, of course, discipline, listening. It's an account about when devotion to Yahweh is weightier than comfort, weightier than explaining things, weightier than even our deepest human attachments. Beloved, in the Akida, Avraham and Yitzhak each suppress something, and together they reveal two different dimensions of surrender before Yahweh, surrender as in obedience unto Yahweh. Avraham suppresses the outward flow of mercy, and Yitzhak suppresses the inward drive of self-preservation. And so the account is so powerful because both father and son are binding something within themselves as they walk toward the altar. Avraham's suppression of his mercy reaches into the deepest quality of his being. I mean, quite literally, in Hebraic thought, we know Avraham is associated with the Sephirah of Chesed, with overflowing loving kindness and generosity. He's hospitable and compassionate. He's the one who welcomes strangers and feeds them. He's the one who makes room for others and intercedes boldly. If you all remember when Yahweh reveals the judgment coming upon Sodom, Avraham pleads for the city and appeals to Yahweh's righteousness. That was a moment where Avraham is literally showing that he's willing to be a little bit combative with Yahweh in order to stand for mercy. He's willing to be vocal with Yahweh in order to stand for chesed. But at the Akida, that same man, it says in Torah, rises early, prepares the wood, and walks essentially in silence toward Mount Moriah. This is the same man whose life has been marked by mercy and chesed, who is now gathering that mercy inward and restraining it. When Avraham does this, sort of, we got to look at it at the multiple layers to really understand just how big of a moment how big of a moment this was. I mean, what Avraham suppresses at first is his fatherly compassion. I mean, Yitzhak is his beloved son. He is the child of the promise, right? The one through whom Abraham has understood the covenant and the future would be unfolding through. And so every instinct of a loving father would move toward protecting and preserving and shielding that son. Avraham had to push down the cry within himself that would normally rise up to defend Yitzhak at all costs. He has to restrain the tenderness that would ordinarily define a righteous father's response. He also suppresses the urge to argue and intercede. Like that moment I mentioned where earlier in his life, he speaks boldly before Yahweh about Sodom. Well, in that moment, his mercy moved him to appeal to Yahweh. But at the Akedah, he carries this instruction of Yahweh in silence. It's a heavy silence, not so many words are exchanged, but what it is revealing, if you look at it deeply, is a man who gathers all of his questions, all of his reasoning, all of his desires to plead, and he places it all beneath obedience, meaning he suppresses all of that to be obedient. Avraham also suppresses his attachment to the promise as he understands it. So when I say Avraham had to suppress his attachment to the promise as he understands it, what I mean is he had to loosen his grip on the way he expects Yahweh's promise to unfold. He had to trust Yahweh more deeply than he trusts his own understanding of how the promise should be fulfilled. And so, in this sense, Avraham suppresses the urge to preserve the covenant on his own terms. This makes Avraham's suppression especially profound because he is restraining the very quality that has most clearly marked his life. He binds mercy, compassion, protective love, the urge to intercede, and he offers it all back to Yahweh in this moment. And so for him, the Akedah becomes a moment where chesed is disciplined and surrendered. Now, let's look at Yitzhak. Yitzhak's suppression moves in a little bit of a different direction. I mean, if Avraham suppresses something that is outward, like mercy, well, Yitzhak is suppressing something inward. He is suppressing his self-preservation, for example. And let us not forget, Yitzhak is about 37 at this time. So he's old enough to do all of the things that would naturally come about when you're putting two and two together. Meaning, if Yitzhak, as a 37-year-old, is carrying the wood, is walking along this journey, asks this question about where's the lamb for the offering, and then Avraham gives a response that is sort of coded, like, Yahweh will provide the lamb for the offering, my son. Well, when I say he's 37, I mean he is old enough to realize the meaning of what is taking place. He knows that he is about to be part of he's the he's the lamb for the offering. He is the offering. He is the sacrifice. He recognizes this. And once that reality becomes clear, Yitzhak faces the most primal human instinct. It is the instinct to preserve his own life. Fear could have surged through him. Confusion could have filled him. His body could have responded in ways that say, let me get out of here because I'm not about to die. Yet, what we understand from this moment, what the Torah says, is that Yitzhak understood this and was okay with it, meaning he was yielding himself. And that means he was suppressing his terror that he might have been feeling. He was suppressing resistance. He was suppressing the impulse to save himself. He was suppressing fear in its most basic form, right? When the soul confronts death, uh, then the natural reaction is typically to panic. Yitzhak instead enters a posture of consent. And that consent reveals immense inward strength. Maybe someone out in the spirit can say, oh, wow, this is a weakness, but that's wrong. It's not a weakness. It is a disciplined surrender. He masters the sort of the cry of the flesh and places himself into the hands of Yahweh. Something else that Yitzhak suppresses is his self-will, meaning it was Avraham, his father, who received the instruction from Yahweh, who's then relaying it. He has to yield his own autonomy to the larger purpose of Yahweh. He also suppresses his urge to accuse. I can put myself in that moment, and I could see how a son could easily turn toward his father with bitterness, or toward Shemaim, to Yahweh, and be in anguish and furious and bemoan. But Yitzhak doesn't do this. Yitzhak surrenders, and this tells us that he restrains those accusations because he is okay with the mystery that is unfolding. But more importantly, he's trusting Yahweh. He's letting reverence govern his soul, and he's not letting his inward fear, his bodily nephesh fear, become what guides and rules that moment. He's showing us that you should not let your emotions rule you. You rule your emotions. Then in Bereshit 22, at the end of this account, we see something really astonishing, meaning Yahweh responds to this act of obedience with blessing that stretches far beyond Mount Moriah. In verses 17 and 18, Yahweh says that he will greatly bless Avraham, multiply his offspring like the stars of heaven and like the sand on the seashore, and that his offspring will possess the gate of their enemies. Then he says that in Avraham's seed, all the nations of the earth will bless themselves because Avraham listened to his voice. This is remarkable because, if I'm Avraham, I may be thinking that I was simply obeying something that is within the boundaries of my family situation, meaning it's a private matter between myself, Yitzhak, and Yahweh. But in Bereshit 22, verses 17 and 18, Yahweh reveals that this act of listening carried generational consequence. The reward, yes, reaches Avraham, but then it moves far beyond him because it touches his offspring. It touches his inheritance. It touches his offspring's offspring. It touches the nations, all of them. It touches all of us, meaning we are still benefiting from one act of disciplined listening that could have been dismissed by the natural mind as some internal family drama on a mountain. But Yahweh saw it as extreme obedience. And so he bequeathed this, if that's the right word, I don't know, but he gifted this, he rewarded this with blessings that have consequences for all of history, meaning we are still benefiting from this blessing. That phrase in Bereshit 22 about possessing the gate of their enemies, it is uh, especially rich because, in the ancient world, the gate was the place of authority. It's the place of judgment and strategy and decision making and power. And so to possess the gate of your enemy really meant taking authority where opposition once ruled. I want to say that again. It means taking authority where opposition once ruled. It meant victory over forces that had tried to confine, threaten, or block or dominate. And spiritually, it points to the inheritance of overcoming opposition and gaining authority in places where enemies once held influence. Yahweh is showing that obedience opens gates and it shifts what future generations are able to inherit. Obedience changes what kind of authority our descendants can walk in. A decision that seems confined to your home or your family or your friendships or your job, or if you're Sarah, your congregation or your personal struggle, that may become the very place where Yahweh releases blessings for many others. Yahweh often hides generational fruit inside ordinary moments of listening. And that is what happened with the Akita. In Isaiah 48:17 and 18, it shows us this same truth, meaning about reward for obedience, just in a different way. In that chapter and verse, it says, Yahweh says, I am your Almighty One, teaching you what is best, leading you by the way you should go. Then he says, if only you had listened to my instructions, then your shalom would have been like a river, and your righteousness like the waves of the sea. These verses are showing us that obedience is tied to instruction, guidance, profit, fruitfulness, and shalom. It's telling us that Yahweh's instructions are the pathway of wise leading. He is showing us and teaching us what is profitable. He is leading us in the way that produces life. And so when people listen, the result is abundance that flows like a river and righteousness that keeps moving like the waves of the sea. This makes the message intensely practical for today. Obedience in the spirit of Abraham and Yitzhak may look like telling the truth when the truth costs you something. It may look like ending a relationship that keeps pulling you away from Yahweh's order. It may look like giving your resources even when your resources feel tight. It may look like apologizing when pride wants you to be stiff-necked. It may look like speaking a needed warning to someone you love, or choosing rest, or telling your job, I gotta take off on Shabbat. It may look like refusing to compromise when compromise might just make things easier. It may look like getting in the car and going where Yahweh says to go, even when the instruction is sudden and the assignment means you're going to be alone. Beloved, in every one of those moments, a person may think that they are simply handling a private matter in daily life, but what Yahweh sees is so much more. He sees the river that can flow from that obedience. He sees the gates that can open through that obedience. He sees the descendants and the communities and the futures that can be strengthened because someone chose to listen to his voice, and it cost something. It was a sacrifice. And so we come back to the question we asked at the beginning. How far are you willing to go for Yahweh? How quickly are you willing to do it? And once you arrive at the place he instructs you to go, will you do what Yahweh says to do there? The Akita answers those questions on Mount Moriah, and Sarah's service answered those questions on the road, at the courthouse, at the doorpost of the courthouse. Mount Moriah has come back into view through a daughter called Moriah, meaning the same pattern appeared again. Yahweh spoke and gave instructions, and his servant responded. A journey was made. People had to travel to the place that was spoken about, and once that place was reached, the instructions were carried out, and then something was established in the earth through disciplined listening. Sarah's service helps us see that the spirit of the Akedah still lives among Yahweh's people. And I have no doubt in my mind that the Ark of Yahweh will be rewarded with victory because of Sarah's service. Shalom, friends.
Today is day 13 of counting the Omer. If you were able to say the blessing and the prayer yesterday, then we invite you to say the blessing and the prayer today. If you weren't able to say the blessing and the prayer yesterday, then we invite you to just say the prayer. Baruch atah Yahweh, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kedeshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al seferat ha'omer. Blessed are you, Father Yahweh, King and ruler of the universe, who has set us apart with his mitzvah and commanded us concerning the counting of the Omer. Today is 13 days, which is 1 week, and 6 days of the Omer. May the merciful one restore unto us the service of the Bet HaMikdash to its place, speedily in our days. Amen. Selah. For the choir master, a song with instrumental music, a psalm. May Yahweh be favorable to us and bless us. May he make his countenance shine upon us forever. That your way be known on earth, your salvation among all nations. The nations will extol you, O Yahweh. All the nations will extol you. The nations will rejoice and sing for joy, for you will judge the peoples justly and guide the nations on earth forever. The peoples will extol you, O Yahweh. All the peoples will extol you, for the earth will have yielded its produce, and Yahweh, our mighty one, will bless us. Yahweh will bless us, and all from the farthest corners of the earth shall fear him. We implore you, by the great power of your right hand, release the captive, accept the prayer of your people, strengthen us, purify us, Yahsod One, Mighty One, we beseech you, guard as the apple of the eye those who seek your oneness. Bless them, cleanse them, bestow upon them forever your merciful kadoshness. Powerful, set apart one, in your abounding goodness, guide your congregation. Only an exalted one, turn to your people who are mindful of your kadoshness. Accept our supplications and hear our cry, you who know secret thoughts. Blessed be the name of the esteem of his kingdom forever and ever. Master of the universe, you have commanded us through Moshe, your servant, to count Seferat HaOmer in order to purify us from our evil and uncleanness. As you have written in your Torah, you shall count for yourselves from the day following the day of rest, from the day on which you bring the Omer as a wave offering. The counting shall be for 7 full weeks. Until the day following the 7th week shall you count 50 days, so that the souls of your people Israel may be cleansed from their defilement. Therefore may it be your will, Yahweh our mighty one, and the mighty one of our scriptural forefathers, that in the merit of the Seferat HaOmer, which I counted today, the blemish that I have caused in the Seferah, Yahsod, Shebe, Gevurah, be rectified, and I may be purified and set apart with your supernal kadoshness. May abundant bounty thereby be bestowed upon all the worlds. May it rectify our nefesh, ruach, and neshama from every baseness and defect, and may it purify and set us apart with your supernal kadoshness. Amen. Selah.
I'll share one additional fun fact about why this service by Sarah was so special, and how just a few of the revelations of Father Yahweh about why we needed to do this came into full view. Well, the name of the building, first off, was named after a gentleman whose name was Leonard. Well, that was my dad's middle name. We then looked up who this Leonard guy was, and we found out that he had a wife named Andrea. Well, that's my mom's name. And he had a sister named Juanita. Well, this is my dad's mom's name. And he had a daughter named Tanya, the name of one of my sisters. And the building was on King Street, which happens to be Sarah's last name. I share all of this, beloved, because it just gets to the heart of why this was not a coincidence, and why, to the T, Yahweh's instructions must be listened to. He sets up these moments that are called tests, but really they're moments to build our character and to build our faith and trust and reliance on Yahweh, and to build our image. May your obedience be like Abraham's, Yitzhak's, and Sarah's.